LOX, I have a story to share. I beg your indulgence on the preamble, but I want to get all of it off of my chest. Not quite a green text, but close enough, I hope. This takes place just over 10 years ago in rural West Virginia, tucked away in the Appalachian mountain range. I suppose that's what attracted my grandfather to the area. He and my grandmother were immigrants from Eastern Europe and proudly referred to themselves as mountain people. It always seemed a strange thing to me to be proud of, but it did make them tough. Tough enough to survive World War II and escape the USSR on bushcraft skills alone, and maybe a bit of luck. The only thing of value they had beside the clothes on their backs was his cross. They were also a superstitious people, and I suppose some of that rubbed off on me too. I grew up on stories of ghosts, beasts of the forest, and cautionary warnings to look out for signs and portents, particularly in dreams. By way of example, my father's godmother swore that at certain times she would hear a broken grandfather clock chime at odd hours, which foretold the imminent death of a family member or friend of the family. That this was taken at face value with nary a gainsay should be sufficient to demonstrate what kind of people they were, or perhaps more accurately, we are. In any event, that love of the mountains led my grandfather to purchase a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, and build a cabin practically from scratch. He was quite the handyman, how he made a living, and my dad lent me and my younger brother to him on more than a few occasions to give him a hand. Just about the only thing he hired someone to do was fireproof the chimney for a wood-burning stove. I spent plenty of summers growing up as a kid, and then later a young man at that cabin, with him either hunting or fucking around in his workshop. Even after he retired, he never stopped tinkering. That's why, when he died my senior year of high school, I stopped going for a couple of years. His death hit me hard, and I think part of me did not want to see that cabin without him there. He had left both the cabin and his cross to me in his will. Anyway, 2 years of avoiding the place, I think, is what caused my younger brother, let's say Ivan, to force the situation. He tells me that he has promised his girlfriend, let's say Elena, a fun week during winter break in a cozy little cabin, and it's my job as his brother to not cock-block him. Utterly trapped by this irrefutable logic, I relent. To my surprise, however, there was a fourth person, one of Lena's friends, a shy girl we will call Sophia. She was there too. I did not put two and two together then, but the other part of Ivan's master plan to get me out of my melancholy was introducing me to Sophia. He's a simple guy, but the best brother anyone could ask for. We packed up our stuff, clothes, gear, and a few guns between Ivan and myself. He had my dad's .308, and I my M4 and a .22 for target practice. The drive up was uneventful, thankfully, mostly chatting, with the majority of the conversation carried between Ivan and Lena while I drove. As reluctant as I was at the start of the trip, the crispness of the mountain air was the most invigorating thing that I had felt in years. The car had to be parked about a few miles from the cabin, making for a brisk hike uphill. Naturally, after a mile or so, the girls dumped their luggage on Ivan and me, except for a small backpack of books Sophia refused to be parted from. At that point, I had her pegged as the consummate bookworm who would probably never leave the cabin. The path up was overgrown from not having been walked in over 2 years, so Ivan and I took turns chopping or otherwise breaking branches and bushes. By the time we made it to the small clearing that the cabin sat in, all 4 of us were beat, and it was nearing dusk. The girls handled cooking, while Ivan and I brought in firewood from the shed for a couple of nights. Ivan and Lena shared the loft. Sophia set up in a cot in my grandfather's workshop to the side of the cabin, and I crashed in the main room on the sofa. The first few days passed peacefully, and we fell into a comfortable routine. We spent the mornings lazily warming up in the cabin before heading outside to hike and explore or target practice. I had fun with that last bit in particular, as I talked Sophia into letting me teach her how to shoot, letting her try the .22 I brought. The girl took to it like a fish to water, which I had not expected from a reserve bookworm. She kept asking me to set up targets further out, which I happily obliged. The evenings were a mix of board games, cards, and storytelling. It wasn't until the 4th night or so that stuff started getting weird. It had snowed lightly that morning, so we spent the day inside. Ivan and Lena had already gone up into the loft, leaving Sophia and I intermittently talking about a book she had been reading and poking fun at the pair's poor attempts at sneaking off each evening. Nothing overt happened at first, but I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I found myself looking over my shoulder towards the door every so often. I don't know if Sophia picked up on my change in behavior or just felt antsy herself, but she moved from her chair to sit next to me on the sofa and cast a few glances at the door herself. A startlingly loud crash at the door made both of us leap up, and Ivan cursed from the loft and poke his head over the railing to look down on us. "What the fuck was that?" he asked me, as Lena joined him at the railing, hair more than a little disheveled. "No clue," I answered honestly, "but I will take a look." I quickly got over being startled and grabbed my M4 shotgun and headed for the door. In truth, I figured something like a deer or coyote had gotten lost or something and crashed into the cabin. I opened the door and swept my flashlight across the front steps. Sure enough, I saw large hoof prints in the snow in a meandering path around the general vicinity of the cabin. I was going to head right back inside when I noticed just how many tracks there were. Looking left and right, I saw that the hoof prints seemed to circle the cabin. It looked as though the deer had walked around the cabin at least 3 or 4 times before crashing into the door and then leaving. A little unnerving, but nothing to piss myself about, so I went back inside and bolted the door. It was just a sick deer, I think, or lost. It was wandering about the place and must have crashed into the door. Ivan shrugged, and Lena said something about the poor thing being all alone. Everyone went to sleep for the evening, but I could not quite shake my uneasy feeling. I chalked it up to being bored and looking for some excitement. I wished that had been all it was. The next morning was a slow one. Last night's little excitement had been all but forgotten. I had promised to take Sophia a ways up the mountain to a small overlook with a great view of range and a small valley. She packed some food for us both, along with one of her bucks, which I teased her about, and we headed out, leaving Ivan and Lena behind to entertain themselves. I had little doubt they'd do just that. I was grateful the snow on the ground was not that deep, as I was keenly aware that Sophia was not typically the outdoorsy type. It did not help that she stubbornly insisted on carrying the backpack so she could pull her own weight. Honestly, it was endearing. An hour or so later, we reached the outcropping, and I kicked the snow off of one of the larger and flatter rocks until we had a place to sit. Lunch was had, and we took in what I will swear to is the best damn view in the Appalachians. After a little bit, Sophia took out a book and began reading, while I took in the surroundings. I lost track of time as that serene moment flowed on until the dumb and numb ache of my lower extremities finally convinced me it was time to head back. It had been quiet before, but now that I was active again, I began to notice exactly how quiet it had become. I scanned the area, but did not notice anything out of the ordinary, and tried to shrug it off. I was on edge on the way back. Each footfall in the snow sounded louder than I liked, and I stopped trying to hide my regular scanning of the area around us. I was certain we were being watched. That itch between my shoulder blades never left, and I caught Sophia looking around too. I picked up the pace, and Sophia kept up without protest. I don't know if she picked up on my demeanor, or she felt the disquiet around us too. I suspect it was a little bit of both. About halfway back, an odd pattern to the brush beside the path caught my eye. Doing a double take with my head, I saw 4 sets of branches laid out in the snow in the shape of people, roughly doll-sized, so only half a foot or so tall. They were no more detailed than gender signs for bathrooms. 2 girls, 2 boys, Sophia sat beside me, looking past my shoulder. She was pointing to what I saw now was supposed to be long hair on 2 of the figures. Well, that's creepy, I uttered to myself to break the silence. Sophia only nodded beside me. I could have chalked it up to hikers or campers messing around or playing games over the summer. It wasn't uncommon to come across abandoned camps or even small structures used by moonshiners, except these were on the top of the snow. The crack of a branch breaking made me freeze stock still while Sophia let out a yelp. The sound echoed before it was eaten by the snow, so it was hard to tell where it came from. My mind told me it was an animal or an old tree bough breaking from the weight of the snow, but somewhere deep down, all I wanted to do was run. When the first sound was followed by a second, then a third, I did just that and grabbed Sophia by the hand, pulling her along with me. The snaps turned into a crashing tumult as we bolted. It sounded well behind us at first, but the path we took meandered along the sharp slopes, moving laterally as often as it did straight. Whatever was chasing us seemed to be making a direct path toward us. Fear knotted in my throat, and I kept shooting glances behind us as we ran. I cursed myself for not bringing my gun on this outing, but there was not anything to do about that then. Sophia was gasping for breath and had my hand in a tight grip. The further we moved, the more I ended up dragging her to keep the pace. With the thing getting closer, I decided that we had to take a straight shot as well, or we would be caught out here for sure. "Don't let go," I yelled through gasping breath as I dragged Sophia straight into the underbrush. It slowed us down somewhat as bushes and branches whipped at us, cutting our exposed faces and snagging our clothing. We were about 3/4 of the way back when a low-hanging branch caught the handle of Sophia's backpack. With a tearing sound, the shoulder strap gave way, and the back was ripped off of her. "Wait," she gasped out, and dug her heels in to slow herself, trying to grab the bag. "Leave it, come on." I grabbed her wrist again and yanked, almost pulling her over, but we resumed our flight. The sound of the thing following us had gotten louder, but despite how still being mid-afternoon, thick brush and the rolling terrain made for very small fields of vision, and at most all I ever saw was a large dark shape careening between trees before vanishing under another slope. A few hundred feet after the backpack was torn off, I finally noticed that the sound behind us had trailed off. I don't know why it stopped chasing, but in that moment I did not care, and only stopped when I broke into the clearing of the cabin, falling to my knees, panting. Ivan and Lena either saw us come bursting into the clearing, or saw us wheezing on hands and knees, but regardless they came over and asked us what happened. I honestly don't know. Something chased us all the way from the overlook. The rational part of my mind tried to explain it away as a small bear or a deer that I'd magnified in my panic, but I didn't really believe that. And, more importantly, I was not going to mess around with danger to my family. Ivan looked past us into the forested hills and shrugged. "Well, let's get the hell inside. We've all had enough of the damn woods for one day." I had utterly no reason to argue with that, so we all went back inside. By evening, it started snowing again, and the weather, normally peaceful, seemed instead to serve only to smother every sound in the clearing. We all stayed up in the main room, talking until a soft crunching of snow outside stifled all conversation. Our heads swung towards the door and slowly followed the sound. The footfalls were soft, but sounded full, heavy. As it passed to the left of the door, the sound dropped off, as the wall of the workshop added a bit of a buffer, but we picked it back up again against the back wall of the kitchen. Crunch, crunch, crunch. None of us wanted to move. We simply followed the sound with our eyes as it circled the cabin. Once, twice, thrice it circled, before Ivan stood up and shouted, "Fuck off, asshole. This is private property. I will fucking shoot you for trespassing if you don't fuck off." His shout caught us off guard, not only for the sound, but because he said aloud what I suspect we'd all been thinking. We were not alone out here anymore. The crunching stopped at his shouted challenge for a few moments, then a series of thunderous blows rained against the door. They sounded like sledgehammers pounding into the weather beams. The girl shrieked, and one of them, I'm not sure which, started crying. Ivan and I looked at each other, and up at the loft, where we had the guns. He practically leapt upstairs while I grabbed my belt knife and told the girls to get into the workshop and close the door behind them. Before they could move, if their trembling legs were even able to move, Ivan was back downstairs. He tossed me my M4 as he fumbled with the bolt on his rifle. "I am warning you, we are going to shoot if you do not leave right now." I tried to keep my tone level, to sound more angry than scared, but I am certain I failed. Whatever was outside either did not care or did not understand, but regardless, paid the warning utterly no heed. Ivan's eyes met mine, and we nodded in affirmation. Sophia saw us lining up our guns on the door and covered her ears, Lena following suit. I put one slug through the door, while Ivan did the same, before quickly racking another round and pulling the trigger again. Despite the ringing in my ears, I heard a scream or a howl or both that made my blood curdle. Malice and pain melted together before fading as whatever it was retreated away into the night. The sound of my thumping heart filled my ears until that too fully subsided. Slowly, I made my way towards the door and whispered for Ivan to cover me as I set my shotgun down next to me, squatting at the door. I peered into the largest hole left by our rounds and did not see any movement. With slow movements, I opened the door a crack and looked into the pitch black. Not seeing anything, I opened the door halfway and swept my light once again. Viscous, deep red, almost black patches of blood stained the snow in front of the door and a mess of those same hoofprints from the previous day. More dark splotches on the wall of the cabin caught my attention. 4 figures were painted on the wall in what looked like blood. 2 boys and 2 girls. Scrawled alongside it in a sloppy hand were the words, "Give just one." I think up until that moment, I had been hoping for a rational explanation, but one of those folk tales I grew up on at my grandfather's side was right here in the forest with us. I closed the door and bolted it tightly, taking a moment to relax my breathing before turning around. "It's gone now," I said, simply. "I don't know where it went, but we did hit it. I think it's bleeding." "Hit it? You mean I didn't blow its fucking head off?" Ivan demanded as he looked from me to the door. "What do you mean it?" Lena whimpered as she gripped Sophia beside her. "You said it was just a deer yesterday, just a sick deer. Maybe it was the same deer that chased you today. Rabies can do that, right?" I avoided her gaze and instead pointed upstairs to the loft. "Look, I don't know what it was other than that it was dangerous. A rabid animal or a crazy person or whatever. It doesn't change that we're leaving at first light, understood?" Ivan sighed and nodded beside me. "Right, fuck this shit. Tomorrow morning. It's probably going to bleed out and drop dead anyway, asshole." He sounded more confident than he looked, but I did not argue. "You girls go upstairs. Ivan and I will sleep in shifts to keep watch," I said, and gave Lena a gentle push towards the stairs, and motioned for Sophia to take her up. She flashed me a plaintive look, but went up with Lena. When the girls went upstairs, I motioned Ivan over to the door and told him what I had seen outside. Against my advice, he demanded to see it for himself. He stepped outside, and a minute later, came back in looking more than a little pale. "It's a fucking psycho, man. We're out here with some axe-murdering hillbilly." I did not feel like arguing the point that what I felt now with us on this mountain felt far crueler and darker than any meth-head woodsman. Ivan and I split the evening in half, with him sleeping first. I don't know if anyone was actually able to sleep, deathly quiet, regardless. I kept my M4 across my lap, the cool metal more than a little comforting. The only change outside was the wind eventually picking up. The front, which had brought the most recent snow, had arrived and started to clear the clouds overhead. A creak on the stairs made me jerk until I saw a sheepish Sophia creeping down the stairs. She sat on the sofa next to me and scooted closer. I took her hand in mine and squeezed as she trembled. Any other situation, I would have been thrilled to have such a pretty girl clinging to me in a cabin. Let me tell you, from personal experience, it's not worth it. Any pleasant daydreams about being the hero in some horror story and getting the girl are a far cry from what it feels like in the moment. It was because I felt wholly inadequate in that moment to actually protect her, not even mentioning whether I could protect myself. Give just one, that thing had demanded. Offered? The more I thought about it, the more it sounded like a bargain being offered. Give just one of us. And then what? The other 3 would leave safely? I shook my head to clear the ugly thoughts and focused on the girl beside me. At least I wanted her to feel safe, even if I felt helpless to actually protect her. That much I was certain of. I reached into my shirt and pulled out my grandfather's cross. I held it out in front of us, the gold backlit gently by the glow from the wood-burning stove. "This cross was my grandfather's," I whispered hoarsely. "It's been in my family for 3 generations now. Him, my dad, and now me." I left out that technically, It had jumped from my father straight to me, but details like that did not seem important at the time. 3 generations, it has kept us safe from war, the evils of man, and evils beyond man. I slipped the chain over her head and let the cross fall around her neck. She gave my hand a slight squeeze and leaned in close to kiss my cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, and it was the sweetest 2 words I ever heard. I don't know exactly when she fell asleep, but at some point she did, leaning against my shoulder. Ivan came down for his turn on watch, clearly not having slept himself. We exchanged wordless nods, and despite trying to keep my eyes open, I drifted off. While the night seemed to drag on, now that morning was here, it seemed like it came far too quickly. I was stiff and exhausted, but more than ready to get off of that mountain. I was the last one awake, apparently. The girls were getting things packed while I looked around for Ivan. In response to my unasked question, Lena pointed towards the door. "He's outside taking a look around." I nodded thanks and grabbed my M4, heading out onto the porch. Cold wind cut my face as I looked around. In the dawnlight, the dried blood painted on the cabin was no less unnerving, and I dreaded the girl's reaction to it. My eyes fell on the words again, "Give just one," and bile rose in my throat. With a sneer, I spit on the wall and purposely turned away. Perched in the trees all around the clearing were starlings or some other small birds sheltering from the wind. Something small darted in front of the steps, and I immediately raised my weapon before lowering it again and bending over to pick it up. It was a page of a book, neatly severed from the binding, with a single hole roughly punched through the center. I was about to toss it onto the ground and let it blow away, when I recalled Sophia's book from yesterday. Sure enough, it was a page from that book. As I stood there, slack-jawed, Ivan came around the corner of the cabin, startling me. In his hand was another half-dozen pages of the book. He looked at the one I was holding and shoved his bunch into my hand. "Read it," he said stiffly. I tilted my head in confusion before flipping the stack of pages over. Scrawled on the back in runny black letters were the same words on the wall: "Give just one." Looking back at the tree line, I realized those birds were not birds. Each and every page of the book had been cut out and hung from the branches like vile talismans. I turned back to my brother. "Get the girls out here now. We are leaving immediately." I was well beyond terrified at this point. Ivan moved past me into the cabin, and I heard them talking through the door. A few minutes later, the 3 rejoined me on the porch. Lena and Sophia gasped at the sight of the cabin wall, but did not ask questions. Sophia, though, was transfixed by the book pages fluttering on the tree branches. I think Ivan had told them what to expect. I set out first, the girls next, and Ivan took up the rear. Despite the snow, we were determined to leave and were packed far lighter than on the trip up. There was not a sound in the woods besides our own movement, and the oppressive feeling of being watched wore on the nerves. I kept my head on a swivel, and I am certain the 3 behind me did as well. About 20 minutes down the mountain, I saw the first sign of trouble. Carved into a broad tree trunk, 4 stick figures were carved, and beneath it, the familiar words, "Give just one." I started when I saw it, and looked back at the 3. Ivan looked grim, and Lena started crying, while Sophia held onto the .22 I had given her all the tighter. "We have to keep moving," I stated, in as steady a tone as I could manage. At least 6 more times, we either came across carvings in tree bark, or stick dolls of a similar type to the first ones Sophia and I had found. By that point, almost an hour had passed, and we were well and truly freaked out. We were jumping at our own shadows. However, it was not much longer after that I began to catch movement to the periphery. Occasionally at first, and then more often. "Guys, faster." I did not need to tell them why. They all had noticed it too by that point. Any semblance of stealth vanished as we heard it crashing to the right, deep in the brush. I turned and fired blindly, splintering bark and bits of wood before continuing on. We were moving at a jog now, everyone panting from exertion. It was not a pace we could maintain the 2 more hours it would take to get back to our vehicle. Whenever the sounds got too close at either side, Ivan or I would fire off a round or two and keep moving. Twice, the suddenness with which the thing's movement charged us drove us off the path, wasting valuable time trying to find our way back. Our progress slowed to a crawl, especially when it would come at us from ahead, further down the mountain, cutting us off. Each time we would try to go further, again thwarted. All with those damnable carved figures taunting us. Give just one. It would have been all too easy. Leave one person there and 3 of us keep running. That is what it wanted. Ivan raised a hand to stop us through a particularly dense bit of brush and leaned up alongside a fallen log a good 200 feet off the trail. The girl sagged against it, sucking in air and catching their breath. "The fucking thing is hurting us," Ivan growled under his breath. I nodded, eyes darting about. I know. We've spent more time retracing our steps than making progress, and it keeps getting ahead of us. Ivan peeked over the log and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. "Keep going?" I nodded. "There is no choice. We can't stay up here. Eventually, the food will run out, or ammo, or nerves." As we meant to make a break back for the path, an inhuman growl issued from somewhere ahead of us, the direction that we needed to go. Loud and direct, crashing through the brush towards the log we were huddled behind, drove us backwards. I sighted my M4 over the log, put 3 slugs down into the brush, and ran. Back to the cabin," Ivan yelled. The girls ran ahead, heedless of thorns and branches as they rushed. Ivan and I picked up the rear, and we made a panic retreat towards the cabin as the thing grew closer. As another howl split the air, Lena turned and looked over her shoulder and went sprawling. She cried out sharply and curled up, clutching her ankle. Ivan and I skidded to a stop by her side as she grabbed onto my brother, grabbing his wrist as tightly as she could. "Don't leave me, please, please don't leave me." Give just one. Of course, she was terrified of that. I waved Sophia on to keep running as Ivan handed me his rifle and hefted Lena onto his back. We resumed running as I checked our rear even more frequently. After a few minutes, however, it became clear that the thing had ceased following us. "Is it gone?" Ivan asked, tentatively, slowing his pace just enough so he did not keel over. I shook my head. "No, we are just going back where it wants us to." Ivan clenched his jaw and looked stiffly ahead, but made no protest. The escape attempt had been thoroughly foiled, and now Lena was injured. When we returned to the safety of the cabin, Ivan sat the sobbing Lena down on the sofa, the distraught girl clutching at him and apologizing. This continued until he returned with snow from outside, wrapped in towels, to use as a makeshift ice pack for her ankle. Thankfully, it was only sprained, not broken. Dejected and feeling trapped, the 4 of us sat in near total silence for several hours. I decided to break the silence, if for no other reason than needing to hear a human voice. "We will have to try again, once Lena's ankle is better. We have food and firewood for at least a week, maybe more if we stretch it, but we cannot stay holed up here, and giving it what it wants is not an option." Agreed? My brother snorted to himself and flashed a half grin. "No shit, Sherlock." Both girls nodded, and Lena in particular looked particularly relieved. Ivan and I split keeping watch again. He and Lena slept upstairs, the latter needing his help to get up to the loft in the first place, while Sophia curled up on the sofa next to me. Frankly, I found her warmth more than a little comforting. Nothing happened for several hours. In any other circumstances, it would have been remarkably peaceful. At some point, Sophia started stirring in her sleep, flexing muscles and jerking, muttering to herself fitfully. I was reluctant to disturb her, but when she started sweating, eyes darting underneath her lids, I gently shook her awake. She bolted upright, nearly knocked my teeth out before flinging her arms around me. I hugged her back and made soothing sounds as she trembled. It was in my dream. I heard it. I could hear it speaking to me. It wants one of us, any one of us, but we have to offer. We have to give one. She looked up at me with teary eyes. "Oh God, I just want to go home." I rocked her gently and told her it was just a dream. I held her tightly as I lied gently to her. Ivan eventually came to take over watch. I tried to sleep. It did not last long, and I woke suddenly to Ivan squatting before me, shaking my shoulder with a finger pressed against his lips. Immediately alert, I sat up, easing Sophia down onto the sofa as I stood up. He motioned for me to follow him up to the loft. By this point, the wind was blowing fairly strongly, and I could hear the cabin creak slightly in protest. When we reached the loft, Ivan gestured to the window and cautiously looked out. I was surprised by how bright it was, but the wind had completely cleared the sky, and a waxing moon sat just above a distant ridge. It cast long shadows across the snowdrifts, inky blotches of pitch black as ugly stains. At first, I did not see anything, but Ivan directed my gaze towards the left, and my breath caught as I saw movement. A dark figure, or the silhouette of one, was clearly visible. I can't say how tall it was. There was nothing for reference, but it seemed tall, massive even. The figure was willowy and lithe, and seemed oddly graceful despite its posture, which was hunched. Broad shoulders met a long torso, supported by two double-jointed legs. Its sinewy arms were impossibly long, seeming to drag almost to its knees. Its head was angular and elongated, and crowned atop it sat a pair of curved horns. It moved, or rather loped, through the snowdrifts, seemingly not hindered by them in the least. I don't know how long the pair of us watched it, but it was enough time for it to circle the clearing several times. Each time it vanished out of sight, we would wait with bated breath for it to reappear from the other end of the clearing, until, one time, it didn't. Ivan and I waited, then looked at each other, before turning to the door at the opposite end of the clearing from where we were watching. We both moved as quickly as we could, and our feet just hit the bottom of the stairs as the wretched pounding and clawing started again. Sophia woke with a start, and I grabbed her arm, pulling her off of the sofa. "Ivan," I shouted, and started pushing the sofa. He got beside me, and the two of us shoved the heavy wooden sofa against the door as the bolt rattled and wood groaned with each blow. Behind me, I could hear Lena hyperventilating as Sophia clutched onto her. I had not even seen the former of the two come downstairs, despite her injury. I had the vague sense that the beast had not actually been trying to get in. Sheer weight alone should have been enough to splinter the old wood holding the bolt into place, along with it stalking in the woods. It could have run us down at numerous points if it had wanted to, but that did not make the terror clump any less in my throat. I wondered if the fear was the point on some level. I think this thing enjoyed our terror, like an appetizer. Fear was a way to hurt us mentally, as it had done so mentally before. The pounding continued, as did the scraping of claws against the wood. Each blow sent vibrations through my body. I had to bite my lips till I tasted blood to stop the quivering of my teeth. Next to me, Ivan had the same look of abject terror. Just give one. I could feel the malice behind each blow. It was suffocating. Only old timbers kept it from our throats. I turned and pushed the sofa harder against the door with my back and dug my heels into the floorboards. I saw Sophia in front of me, kneeling and rocking slowly, hands clasped together. It registered vaguely that she was praying, holding the cross I had given her in her hands. She held it so tightly that it must have cut the palms of her hands. I don't think I will ever forget that moment as long as I live. A line of red running down her pale skin, bowed head framed by matted blonde hair, as a demon from grandfather's story bayed outside loud enough to wake the dead. Something clicked in me at that moment. My younger brother, my blood, was beside me. Beside him was the woman my brother loved, and before me was what seemed like the most beautiful girl in the world. The thought of her torn apart by this horned beast made me sick to my stomach. Give just one. How could I sacrifice any one of them for my wretched life? An idea possessed me, and I was desperate enough to follow it through. If this beast was a demon, why not fight it like a demon? I grabbed my brother's shoulder and told him to hold the door. Ivan nodded and braced himself as I jumped up and ran to the workshop across the main room. Stumbling around, I frantically scanned the walls, looking for the torch and silver solder I knew should be there. I thank God my grandfather always kept the place organized and found what I needed. The infernal pounding kept up as with shaking hands, I wrapped the silver solder around the blade of my belt knife. Without wasting any time, I lit the acetylene torch and began to melt the solder. It was ugly, it was sloppy. Clumps fell off as I made this jerry-rigged silver blade. But Christ, if at the end I did not have something sharp, covered in at least some silver. I tied the handle of the blade around the end of the barrel of my M4 and went back into the main room. The slamming was joined with guttural growling and the digging of claws into the wood. I think something of my intent showed on my face as Ivan just nodded at me. I steeled myself to face an inhuman beast baying for blood. Ivan and I grabbed the sofa and yanked it away from the door with a sharp crash. As quickly as it fell, my brother put a round through the door, then another and another. Rage-filled howls split the air, and a primal fear tried to work its way up from the pits of my stomach. I opened the door and stepped out, shotgun in hand. I suppose I expected it to be standing there, waiting for me, Satan spawned to face. Instead, I caught a blur of movement to my right and crippling pain in my chest and stomach. The wind was knocked from my body, and I felt as though my ribs were broken. Turning slightly under the weight, I was able to kick upwards with my legs, desperate to keep this thing away from me, and thing it was. The eyes were the part I can never forget. They were onyx pits, sunken into its canine face, matte and inky. From them I felt rage, malice, contempt, lust, and murderous intent. I was looking into the face of evil, and it knew me. It offered me things. I don't know if anyone here has truly felt temptation. I don't mean the temptation to cut class or to tell off someone you really shouldn't. As its pitted eyes bored into me, it tempted me. It offered me things I was afraid to admit I wanted. It showed me each person who had wronged me, flayed and dressed in sackcloth, writhing in pits filled with salt. Give just one. It showed me a jeweled crown of 10 points lowered onto my head by its bloody hands, and my name echoed by a million voices. Give just one. It showed me, Sophia and Lena, radiant and naked, kneeling at my feet, weaving collars of supple fig leaves around their slender necks. Give just one. I hated it. I hated it because I could not deny that I wanted it. At least, part of me did. It's easy to say you would never give in to temptation when the temptation is theoretical and the offer is not before you. I did not doubt this thing had the power to fulfill its end of the bargain, and I knew the price. Give just one. I wrestled with it as much as myself in those seconds as they dragged on, until I thought of Sophia again, her trembling figure kneeling in prayer, and the slow drop of blood from her palm, which clutched my cross. Shame and resolve filled me, and I denied the thing. With every fiber of my being, I denied it, and I felt a weight lifting off of my soul. I knew that it had lost me. Its prize was snatched away, and rage made it vengeful. I leveraged my legs upwards into its chest, frantic to keep it away from my throat, while my right hand groped blindly for my shotgun. Cold steel numbed my fingertips, and I gripped it firmly. As the pitch-black voids descended towards me, I stabbed. I felt a moment of resistance, then the yielding of flesh. The beast shook violently, and I stabbed again, heaving with all of my strength. I pushed it off me in time to see Ivan readying his rifle at the door. Ear-splitting howls filled the night, cut off only by the flash and report of Ivan firing. I don't know if he hit it, and I don't think it mattered. The horned thing clutched its chest where I had stabbed it with makeshift silver and fled into the night. I knew that the demon had been beaten, and it would not return for us. I don't mean to suggest that we killed it. I'm not even sure that killing it was ever possible or would have been meaningful, even if the body had died. Ivan certainly thought that it went off and bled out in some gully in the mountains. It's easier for him to think about it in those terms. A beast or a creature, evil certainly, but still a beast, fundamentally mortal, and as such, subject to death. But he did not see its eyes like I had, and as his brother, I don't want to be the one to strip him of the innocence. It was a manifestation of evil, a spirit or a demon. It inhabited flesh, but it was not of the flesh. Such things are meant to be resisted, not destroyed. At least, that's what I've come to believe. As for the four of us, we are doing well. Lena is now my sister-in-law, and I have 2 wonderful nieces. As for Sophia, she never did give back my cross. She refused to part with it for anyone but the 4th generation of my family. So, I had little choice but to marry her, of course. Our son has it now. Someday, when my nieces and my children are older, I will tell them this story too. They already hear the ones my grandfather told me. Lena rolls her eyes and tells me not to scare her daughters, but no one, not Lena, Ivan, or Sophia, ever actually tell me to stop. They know children need to learn that evil is real. God bless you all and keep you. May you never forget it, Ivor. And that, X, is my story. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you.